welcome to the Context USA. I'm Sumi Somaskanda on the Columbia-Venezuela border. And with me, Clare Richarsdon in Manhattan, where Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has appeared in court after being flown out of Caracas by U.S. Special Forces. I'm Caitriona Perry, live in Washington, bringing you all the political reaction from the White House and Capitol Hill.
And I'm Ben Brown here in London on the response of an astonished international community to that US military operation in Venezuela.
Don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
We're in charge.
Then the judge asked him to confirm that he was indeed Nicolas Maduro, which usually he would just respond, a defendant would respond yes. He took the time to sort of profess his innocence and say he'd been kidnapped, he was captured at his home, and the judge sort of interrupted him to say there will be a time and place for that.
I come here in pain for the suffering that's been caused to the people of Venezuela by the illegitimate military aggression against our country.
This tenuous relationship that you mentioned between Delcy Rodriguez and the U.S., that could turn at any moment and really change the situation here at the border and across Colombia and, of course, inside Venezuela. Coming up on the Context USA, we have special coverage starting with the extraordinary court appearance here in New York City of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. They both pleaded not guilty to charges of drug trafficking. Mr. Maduro saying he'd been kidnapped by American troops and is a prisoner of war. Now, just across this border in Venezuela, Mr. Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, has been sworn in as the interim leader. But many here are asking, can she work together with the Trump administration to run Venezuela?
And indeed, it seems President Donald Trump may have other ambitions overseas. He says communist Cuba is now ready to fall. And he's repeated his demand that Greenland, currently part of Denmark, of course, should be controlled by the United States.
Well, the world has been watching all of this unfold with astonishment. At an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, China accused Washington of bullying, but the US ambassador insisted Venezuela could not be left in the hands of an illegitimate leader.
Now, the deposed Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, Celia Flores, they pleaded not guilty to drugs and weapons charges in a court in New York. President Maduro saying that he was kidnapped by American security forces, that he's a decent man and still the president of Venezuela. Okay, Oliver Wack joining us from Bogota. Thank you so much for your analysis today, and we'll be talking a bit more about the region, the impact of the developments in Venezuela across Latin America in a moment. You're watching the Context USA on BBC News across the world and across the UK. Thank you for watching BBC.
Speaking roughly this level.
Okay, welcome back to Context USA. You're watching the Context USA. We're on the Venezuelan-Colombian border here, but we were talking just a moment ago about the impact of the developments in Venezuela across Latin America. And now we're seeing Venezuela's closest regional ally, Cuba, as well, beginning 2 days of national mourning for 32 Cubans killed in that U.S. raid on that compound in Venezuela. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well.
Very good to talk to you. Thank you so much, Rasmus Brun Pedersen from Aarhus University in Denmark. Plenty more to come. You're watching the Context USA on BBC News. Hello and a very warm welcome back to the Context USA with me, Ben Brown, here in London.
And me, Caitriona Perry, here in Washington. Still to come on this special programme. The shares of American oil companies rise, Chevron, by as much as 9%, as President Trump says US oil firms will invest billions into Venezuela. Well, we've been talking about all of those countries that President Trump has mentioned in the last 24 hours or so who may be liable for a similar fate as Venezuela. So let's talk about Iran, who he also mentioned. Demonstrations have been taking place across that country for a 9th day.
Yeah, and in his wide-ranging remarks on Air Force One on Sunday night, Mr. Trump was asked about recent comments on Iran in which he said the United States was locked and loaded if Iranian police kill peaceful protesters. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Okay, such a critical resource, clearly in the crosshairs of this larger geopolitical battle. Matt Smith, really good to have your analysis on the program. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching The Context USA. We're going to take a short break. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
You're watching The Context USA on BBC News. So let's focus now on the reaction here in the US to those developments over the past few days. There has been a bipartisan push in the Senate to have a vote on a War Powers Act to limit the Trump administration from taking further action in Venezuela without congressional approval. Okay. Chris, thank you very much for those thoughts. Good to have you on the show here. We have lots more to talk about based on the events of the last few days. So do stay with us here on BBC News for more in this special edition of The Context USA.
See you very soon.
Hello and welcome to The Context USA. I'm Sumi Somaskanda on the Colombian-Venezuelan border. Tonight, we're focusing on the appearance of Venezuela's leader Nicolas Maduro in a court in New York after he was flown out of Caracas by U.S. Special Forces.
I'm Caitriona Perry, live in Washington. We'll also have all of the latest political reaction, the latest from the White House and Capitol Hill.
And I'm Ben Brown here in London on the response of an astonished international community to that US military operation in Venezuela.
Don't ask me who's in charge because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Because we're in charge.
Then the judge asked him to confirm that he was indeed Nicolas Maduro, which usually he would just respond, a defendant would respond yes. He took the time to sort of profess his innocence and say he'd been kidnapped, he was captured at his home, and the judge sort of interrupted him to say there will be a time and place for that.
I come here in pain for the suffering that's been caused to the people of Venezuela by the illegitimate military aggression against our country.
And joining us on the programme to discuss the extraordinary events of the last couple of days, we have Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs and author of the briefing book on Substack, and Joe Moreno, Republican former federal prosecutor.
Hello, you're very welcome to The Context USA. Our coverage today dominated by the repercussions of those extraordinary events in Venezuela over the weekend. And of course, today's appearance in a New York court by the former Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, in a real show of defiance during that court appearance, Mr. Maduro told the court, quote, "I'm still the president of my country," as he and his wife pleaded not guilty to a range of charges, including drugs trafficking and terrorism.
Well, we'll be addressing that what next question and plenty more besides in just a moment. Joe and Joel, stay with us. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Welcome back to The Context USA, and we're following a truly extraordinary day in which we saw the former president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, appear in a New York court in handcuffs on weapons and drugs charges.
Yeah, the seizure of Mr. Maduro at the weekend took place on the orders of President Donald Trump, actions that the United States maintains.
By having systems like the United Nations and NATO and other alliances,
sorry for interrupting
this
you,
is
Joel.
falling apart.
They were exactly the points made, weren't they, this morning at the Security Council, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. Stay here on BBC News.
Hello again, welcome back to The Context USA with me, Ben Brown in London.
And me, Caitriona Perry in Washington.
And I'm Sumi Somaskanda at the Columbia-Venezuela border.
Well, oil prices remain volatile and gold rises after that American operation in Venezuela as President Trump says US oil companies will invest billions in the country.
A very warm welcome back to The Context USA, where we're following today's extraordinary events. We saw the former Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, appear in a New York court, all on the orders of President Trump.
Well, President Trump has been told by Greenland's prime minister to drop what he called his fantasies of annexation. That's after repeated American threats to take over the autonomous Danish territory.
Shortly after the US raid on Venezuela on Saturday, the wife of one of President Trump's senior aides posted this on X, a map of Greenland in the colours of the American flag with the caption, "Soon." Now that was posted by Katie Miller, who is the wife of the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and close confidant of the President, Stephen Miller.
Yeah, and the US president was asked about his intentions when it comes to Greenland. Take a listen.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
Let's talk about this now with our panel. Joe Moreno, Republican former federal prosecutor, and Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs and author of the briefing book on Substack. Joel, to you first. When you were in the Department of State, was there ever any conversation about the national security value of Greenland and whether it should belong to the US?
Oh boy, Caitriona, I don't think anybody in their wildest fantasies would have ever thought about annexing Greenland or attacking it. When I was at State and I served as a career officer in the Bush administration, I was an appointee in the Obama administration. I spent 7 years there in total, and I got to tell you, that never came up. And in fact, the idea that the United States would colonize other countries in our region never came up. It's just not how we've been operating since World War II. And as we were discussing before the break, the United States, we've benefited from the international system that it was built after World War II. Why did we have world wars? Because of the exact dynamics that Donald Trump right now is fostering, where countries competed and colonized and took regional spheres of influence rather than looking at issues and trying to resolve them collectively in international entities and fora where there could be real debate. And I just think we're on a dangerous path right now. So to Katie Miller's point, taking over Greenland, you're next. I don't see why not, quite frankly, if the president wants to do it. And I think it could be calamitous for the United States.
Joe, the Danish prime minister is none too pleased. She is demanding that President Trump, quote, stop his threats. Why antagonize a close ally like Denmark?
I mean, look, first of all, the cynical Republican side of me saying that taking on Greenland or Canada, that's a lot of Democrats we'd be bringing in the country. Republicans will never control Congress again. But no, look, I'm not going to defend that kind of talk. Trump's rhetoric is awful. It's very offensive. It's one thing to show interest and show an alliance with a foreign country like Greenland, and it is strategically important. And we do have military operations there. But I don't like antagonizing our allies. I really wish you wouldn't do it. I do write it off, though, to rhetoric and chest thumping. I think these concerns about imperialism or Greenland being at gunpoint are kind of way overdone. So I think we just need to tone it down a little bit. And I wish the president would, too.
Joel, do you think this is just rhetoric? Because, I mean, it would be, were America in some ways to try and take over Greenland, as the president has kind of hinted or threatened repeatedly, that would effectively be a NATO country going into another or part of another NATO country, an ally.
Yeah, I mean, it would clearly be an act of war. Look, having bases on foreign soil is normal. We have basing agreements with partner governments in order to allow our military to operate on their territory. Look, President Trump now, if we're supposed to take the last few days of all of his aides saying, listen, when he says what he wants, he means it and he'll follow through. He just did that to Maduro, so listen to us. Well, let's believe him. He says he wants to take Greenland. I think that clearly is something that he wants to do physically. And Joe, I hate to say it, there are only 60,000 people in Greenland, so it wouldn't barely even register as a tenth of a congressional district. So really wouldn't hurt Republican odds as much as just the idea that we should not be a colonist and we should not be wasting our resources taking over countries that are already our friends.
I think Joe was talking about taking in the whole of Canada, maybe losing control of all the houses.
Well, that might be a little better for Democrats.
Mark Carney is running to a bunker even as we're joking about that. But Joe, just on a practical sense, I mean, is that even possible? You know, I mean, we're always warned, sometimes the president issues bluster, Marco Rubio warning us at the weekend to take him at his word. But how actually doable is something like this?
I mean, I'll defer to Joel on the how doable it is. I mean, like Venezuela and Greenland are two very different things. Venezuela, the investigation into Maduro started back in 2011 under President Obama. He wasn't charged until 2020, but that was a long time in coming. You're talking about millions of tons of cocaine imported into the United States, as well as awful human rights abuses and the ruining of the Venezuelan economy. So it wasn't just like an arbitrary decision to go to Venezuela. That's been a long time in the making. Greenland, on the other hand, look, again, I wish the president wouldn't say that sort of thing. I'm not even going to try to defend it, but I don't take it seriously. And I don't think there's any real concern here that we're going to go into a NATO ally and extract land from them.
Okay, well, Denmark, as we said, certainly taking it very seriously. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, talk about another country possibly in Donald Trump's eyesight, Cuba. First, a break around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Context USA on BBC News. Venezuela's closest regional ally, Cuba, is beginning 2 days of national mourning for the 32 Cubans killed in that US raid on Caracas.
Yeah, many worked as Mr. Maduro's personal security detail or inside the Venezuelan military.
Over in Venezuela, just across the border from where I am, Delcy Rodriguez, Mr. Maduro's vice president, now becoming the interim leader, sworn in, saying she was pained to see what she called the kidnapping of Mr. Maduro and his wife as the U.S. Special Forces took him to the U.S. to face those charges in New York. And here where we are at the border, of course, that tension, that unknown, that uncertainty for the entire region, as we've been discussing in the program, for Cuba, for Colombia, and really the region on a whole for Latin America as the U.S. establishes its presence here. Stay with us here on The Context USA.
Well, President Trump has vowed to tap into Venezuela's oil reserves after seizing its leader, Nicolas Maduro. The United States president is calling on American oil firms to invest billions of dollars in the South American country, but can. All right, well, Joel, thank you very much for being with us. Joel Rubin and Joe Moreno, thank you very much for being our panelists.
Thanks much.
On a momentous day, the day that saw former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro appear in a New York courtroom. Thank you for watching The Context USA.
Hello there, good evening. There's more snow and ice to come in the forecast